Now let's discuss this with with our international correspondent, that's Simon Marks. Very good evening to you, Simon. And as we know, the relationship between America and Israel is one that is quite close. Any word from the White House to react to this so far?
There's been no reaction at all from the White House or the State Department yet, Masa. But I have to say this is an extraordinarily busy day in Washington, D.C., because within the last couple of hours, millions of pages of documents pertaining to Jeffrey Epstein were released by the Department of Justice. And the president earlier today nominated his new man to be the next chair of the Federal Reserve. So they're dealing with all sorts of different things, and this issue between South Africa and Israel is not yet something that they've reacted to. But there is no question at all that they will have learnt of the decision by the South African government to send Israel's ambassador to South Africa packing. Also, they will have learnt that the Israeli government has now decided to order South Africa's top diplomat in Tel Aviv out of the country. I think that when reaction comes from the United States government, it may well chide South Africa and make the point that the way in which the South African government is treating the Israeli ambassador is not, for these alleged infringements, and particularly for the social media messages in which there appeared to be implied criticism of President Cyril Ramaphosa. Well, of course, it was the South African ambassador to Washington, Ibrahim Rasool, who was ordered out of Washington by the Trump administration for saying things that the Trump administration deemed was not in accordance with his status here as an ambassador. He didn't do it on social media, of course. Ibrahim Rasool spoke to a forum and was critical of President Donald Trump and accused the American administration of embracing white supremacist views. So I suspect that the American position is going to be, well, you didn't like it when we did it to your ambassador for doing something similar, though not exactly the same, as what has taken place with the Israeli ambassador to South Africa. I certainly don't think there will be any sympathy expressed here for the South African government's position, not least because of the very close alliance and relationship between the US and Israeli government. So I certainly don't think that we'll be seeing any sort of thumbs up for what has taken place in Pretoria today. Much more likely this is going to be something that adds additional stress to the bilateral relationship between the US and South Africa. And remember that in the background to all of this, we're still waiting to see exactly what happens with Brent Bozell, the man who's now been confirmed this side as America's new ambassador to South Africa. Is President Ramaphosa going to accept him when he arrives in South Africa to take up his post at the embassy in Pretoria? And remember that Brent Bozell has a long personal history of being pretty outspoken from the right politically here in the United States. And he's certainly going to be, I think it's fair to say, a punchy presence diplomatically in Pretoria when he arrives to lead the US embassy to South Africa, assuming, of course, that President Ramaphosa decides to accept his diplomatic credentials.
And, Simon, as you're mentioning, the US has got a lot of things going on in its agenda right now, so haven't responded. We've got the Epstein files, we've got the anti-ICE protests also taking place. But Israel wasted no time in reacting. Of course, as you mentioned, also kind of a tit-for-tat thing over there. But I do want to read a post by the DIRCO spokesperson, Crispin Piri. And he said that Mr. Sean Beineveld is an ambassador to the state of Palestine, not Israel. Israel's obstructionism forces a farcical arrangement where he is accredited through the very state that occupies his host country. This underscores Israel's refusal to honor international consensus on Palestinian statehood. Be that as it may, if he's an official for Palestine or Israel, Israel's speedy reaction, what do you make of that?
Well, I think there's no surprise in it. That's a very important clarification, Master. I'm glad you read that out from Crispin Piri. Look, I think there's no surprise in it. I mean, tit for tat in these matters diplomatically is always highly likely. Now, the South African government, of course, did not engage in tit for tat when Ibrahim Rasool was thrown out of Washington, D.C. But under these circumstances, given the strength of feeling that I suspect exists in Israel over the removal of their ambassador to South Africa, it's not surprising to see, I think, the authorities there taking this action in response.
Yeah, and Simon, I want to talk a little bit before I let you go about what's happening in the United States right now, particularly in Minnesota, as we're seeing widespread protests following the killing of Renee Good and then, of course, Alex Pretti. Now, these anti-ICE protests have now seen the arrest of a well-known journalist in Don Lemon. Tell us a little bit more about this arrest of Don Lemon.
Well, and before I do that, let me tell you that within the last few minutes, there has been more breaking news about the killing of Alex Pretti, the 37-year-old American citizen gunned down by the Border Patrol in Minneapolis last Saturday. The Justice Department is now opening a probe that will involve its Civil Rights Division to see whether those Border Patrol agents can be legally charged with crimes pertaining to Mr. Pretti's civil rights. So that's a huge move by a Department of Justice that up until a few minutes ago had maintained that the investigation into Mr. Pretti's killing would only be led by the FBI and by the Department of Homeland Security and would not involve the Civil Rights Division of the DOJ. So that indicates, I think, even more that those Border Patrol agents may no longer enjoy the support that they certainly enjoyed in the early part of the week from senior figures within President Trump's administration. As far as the arrest of Don Lemon and another journalist, Georgia Fort, is concerned, they were in attendance at a Baptist church in St. Paul, which is the city right next to Minneapolis in Minnesota, last Sunday, where they were aware that protesters were going to enter the church and disrupt Sunday services because one of the pastors in the church was being targeted by demonstrators because he also has a job with ICE, with those agents involved in mass deportation operations in Minneapolis. Don Lemon and Georgia Fort, two journalists, along with other activists, are now facing criminal charges. That, in the case of Mr. Lemon and Georgia Fort, is a huge breach of their First Amendment rights to engage in journalism. Already, two separate judges, two separate efforts by the government in Minnesota to get arrest warrants approved were rejected by the courts there. So having been sent away twice, the Department of Justice then decided to impanel a federal grand jury, which is how they managed to secure arrest warrants and indictments for Mr. Lemon and also for Georgia Fort. I mean, this is causing uproar within the journalistic community here because it is such a blatant effort to undermine America's First Amendment, guaranteeing freedom of speech and guaranteeing the press the rights to observe and cover anything that's taking place here in the United States. And it comes just a few days after the FBI raided the home of a Washington Post journalist who has been reporting for months the strength of feeling about among federal government workers here in Washington and many fired federal government workers about efforts by the Trump administration to cut the size of the federal government. So this is being widely seen as an attack on freedom of the press. I think they'll be lucky to get these Don Lemon charges to advance very far through the court system, but it certainly is attracting a lot of attention here today.
Yeah, and thanks for that huge development into Alex Pretti's killing and what's going to be happening there. But, you know, speaking about this seeming apparent attack on journalism as well, Don Lemon has been very, very vocal. Has been one of those journalists who's been very vocal amongst others as well on his social media pages and like other Americans too, just voicing their concerns about these ICE agents. Now that they have been arrested and detained, do we know where he is and what the next step will be?
Well, he was arrested in California. He was actually covering the Grammys. So Mr. Lemon is no longer, as you know, with CNN. Yeah. He has his own thing online. He does his own programming now. And he was covering the Grammys, I believe, out in Los Angeles when the arrest was effected. So I presume that he is still in California because there would have to be legal processes for him to be transferred anywhere else. But certainly this is a dramatic move against a very well-known figure here in the United States, and not someone who has ever hidden his criticism of Donald Trump and the policies that his now two terms in office have pursued. Certainly someone that will have been on President Trump's radar screen. And it is important to underscore that, again, we have witnessed over the last year the evisceration of the traditional independence of the Department of Justice. We saw here earlier this week an FBI raid on an election storage facility in Georgia. Remember that President Trump insists that he won the 2020 election nationally, not Joe Biden, and specifically that he won the election in Georgia, even though there have been 3 counts of the votes there and multiple efforts at legal action, none of which have suggested there was any kind of foul play in that state's handling of its vote back in 2020. So when the FBI descended on that election storage unit this week in Georgia, it was apparent that that had been directly either ordered by the White House or was being carried out by President Trump's top officials in a bid to curry favor with him. So the independence of all of these investigative arms criminally of the American government has basically been shattered. And as a result, you're seeing prosecutors and Attorney General Pam Bondi, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, absolutely engaging in investigations and raids and arrests that you would never previously have seen here, because most past presidents, if they didn't jealously guard the independence of the Department of Justice, at least publicly acknowledged that it existed. This president doesn't do that at all.
Simon Marks, so much to unpack. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We look forward to hearing more that comes out of the White House once they do respond to these news.